June 19, 1944. Philippine Sea, east of Saipan. The carrier's deck thunders like an iron earthquake. Heat ripples off exhaust stacks, the ocean a sheet of hammered tin under a white noon sun. In the island superstructure, a combat information center packed tight with plotting boards and headphones hisses with voices. Bogey Group, bearing 340, Angels 25, Speed 250. Green grease pencil lines sweep across a plexiglass plot as air search radar pulses through the haze. The fighter direction officer barks to the talker. Vector the Hellcats to 290, intercept 3 minutes. On the flight deck, Lieutenant Indajari, Paul Red Haggerty of VF-15, drops his chin to the cockpit combing of an F6F Hellcat. The canopy is slid back, the smell of avgas in his throat, the Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp idling with a rock crusher rumble. He taps the gun switch safe. 6 .50 caliber Brownings, 400 rounds per gun. And checks the coolant shutters, even though his plane is air-cooled and doesn't need the fuss. Habit. The deck-edge elevator clanks. Another blue-gray Hellcat rises like cargo from the sea. The yellow shirts whirl paddles. Haggerty flashes a thumbs up. Behind his shoulder harness, a hand-stitched patch reads, Grumman. The deck crew jokes they work at the Grumman Iron Works because the cats come off the line thick-skinned and overbuilt. Out here, that nickname is a prayer. Skipper to red section, you're up first. Crackles the radio. CIC Vector 290. Fast movers inbound. Likely Zeke's with company. The Hellcat ahead of Haggerty spools up, tail yawing as the pilot holds her straight. The launch officer's hand slices down. The catapult answers with a savage punch, and the fighter leaps forward, tail up, wings biting, then the ocean drops away. Haggerty shoves throttle forward to the stop, 52 inches of manifold pressure, and the double wasp turns from rumble to roar. The nose shudders, the world shakes, and in 4 heartbeats the deck is gone, replaced by blue sky and spray glitter. The landing gear thumps up and locks. He gives the stick a nudge, feels the steadiness. Big tail, wide track gear, mass tucked around the engine like a safe. A plane you can plant on a pitching deck or throw through a climbing turn and know she'll come back. Below, the carrier task force draws a steel geometry across the sea. Essex, Bunker Hill, Lexington, and their sisters. Their wakes braided white. Screening destroyers knifing at the edges, all eyes on the sky. Inside CIC, the fighter director watches the glowing blips converge. Raid 4, large Angels 27, splitting now. Vector 40 degrees left. You're hot. Haggerty glances right. His wingman, Ans Billy Parker, clings in formation, tapping his oxygen mask. You good, Billy? Good, Parker replies, voice thin with altitude. Let's go collect some meatballs. Above 20,000 feet, the air goes harsh and clear. Contrails scrawl like chalk lines. Ahead, specks, then pinpricks, then the insect shimmer of prop discs. A screen of Mitsubishi A6 M50s, with D4Y Judy dive bombers hanging behind them, the rising sun roundels burning red against their wings. Haggerty remembers rumors passed down squadron ready rooms for 2 years. How Japanese pilots laughed at the lumbering Grummans, called them clumsy tin bats. The early war had given them reason. Clipped Wildcats chased by ultralight Zeros that could pivot in a teacup. But the Hellcat is not a Wildcat, and this sky is not 1942. Red leader tally-ho. Multiple bandits, 11 o'clock high. His voice steadies. We hold altitude. Boom and zoom. No flat turns with Zeke's. Copy. Copy. Parker and the second element answer. Haggerty pushes the nose 2 degrees down, building speed. The Hellcat, built like an anvil and torqued by 2,000 horsepower, prefers gravity-assisted introductions. The altimeter unwinds. Wind shrieks through the canopy seams. His sight ring crawls up to a leading zero that is just banked shallow, exposing the pale belly. He squeezes a short burst to clear the guns. The Brownings cough and the whole airframe hums as brass cases flicker past his wing. Now. He kicks right rudder, lays the sight just ahead of the Zero's spinner, and squeezes. Tracers stitch through the thin canvas and metal of the Japanese fighter. Fuel vapor flashes. The Zero yaws, folds, and spins, shedding fragments like autumn leaves. He slashes down through the formation, high speed, no turn fight, and pulls out hard. The G's press him into the seat. The Hellcat groans but holds, wings unshaken. "Splash one," he hears himself say. Behind him, Parker yelps, "On your six, brake, Red, brake." A Zero has dropped into Haggerty's wake, its 20mm spitting white puffs. He throws the Hellcat into a shallow rolling dive. It is a bad idea in a fragile machine. It is salvation in this one. A few hits patter the fuselage. The engine coughs once and roars on. The Grumman Iron Works soaks it up. The armor plate behind Haggerty's seat, suddenly the most comforting object in the world. He hauls back, converts speed into altitude, and the Zero, outmatched in the dive and now slow in the climb, slides below his nose. Another quick burst, short, disciplined, and the pursuer tumbles away. CIC to Red Leader. Second raid approaching from starboard, Angels 18, Vector 110. The voice is dry, precise. The distance between radar sweep and gun sight measured in syllables. Friendly bombers, feet wet. Protect the package. Acknowledged, Haggerty says. Leveling with Parker's wingtip. He can see the wakes of torpedo bombers and dive bombers forming beneath him. Avengers and Helldivers, moving in strings, their lives tied to the blue fighters above. Over the radio, other sections call kills, 2, 3, 4, and a few broken, quiet words that mean a pilot will not be walking back into the ready room. The sky becomes a machine shop of violence. Hellcats drop through zeros, climb back with brutal torque, and drop again. They don't dance. They club. When a Judy tries to trench toward the carriers, 3 F6Fs roll in together, rip its wings, and peel out in a loose luffberry that never quite closes, never invites a turn fight. Discipline holds. Radar calls keep the patrols where they must be. Altitude stays in the bank like money. And through it all, the big blue cats take hits, take dives, and come out the other side still flying. Haggerty looks left and catches the briefest glimpse. Another section, another squadron, trailing smoke and contrails, and beyond them, a horizon lined with wakes running east, away from this killing ground. He doesn't have words for the scale yet, only the small arithmetic of his oxygen gauge and the next vector call. But under the oxygen mask, he is smiling. Somewhere, in briefing rooms far away, men once laughed at Grumman's heavy fighters. Up here, the joke is bleeding out at 12,000 feet. June 19th, 1944. Philippine Sea, afternoon hardening toward late day glare. In the dark cave of Combat Information Center, the air search scope blooms with fresh pips. Raid 6, now 50 miles. Bearing 080, Angels 22. Chalk squeaks. Plotters slide plastic ships across the table. The fighter director, a lean lieutenant commander with headphones clamped tight, does the math between blip and deck cycle. Launch the spare division. Push red and blue to intercept Point Bravo. Maintain altitude advantage. No hero turns. On KP station, Red Leader Haggerty checks the clock on his kneeboard. The pencil-scratched fuel curve. The thin black line that says when he must break off or the ocean will own him. CIC, Red Actual. State Angels on raid. He watches sunlight flash off 100 square miles of chop. The high, thin cold biting through his gloves at the knuckles. 2-2. Friendly strike returning lower. Angels 1-4. Deconflict and cover. Copy. Read out. A new vector slides across his mind like a ruler. He rocks the Hellcat's wings, signals the section to follow, and noses into a shallow descent. The kind that builds speed without throwing away the banked altitude they will spend like bullets. Beneath them, dots resolve into the humped backs of Grumman TBF Avengers limping home. Bomb bays empty, gunners scanning every cloud edge. Haggerty feels the tug of protection and the itch of pursuit at the same time. Then the sky ahead flicks with motion. A climbing screen of zeros, cannon flashes twinkling like sewing needles. Blue section, take high right. Red has lead pair. He breathes once, deep and steady, and the double wasp answers his throttle with that iron trustworthy bellow, the kind engineers earn with overbuild and pilots praise with superstition. He slides the sight in a steady lead on a zero easing nose high to cover a Judy. Short burst. Flutter of orange under the canopy frame. The Zero's wing root smokes, fabric peels. It half rolls and falls away. Haggerty never watches them hit. There is always the next silhouette, the next angle, the next energy state. Brake left. Parker's voice arrives a heartbeat before the tracers do. Haggerty slashes the stick, stomps a boot of rudder, and the Hellcat heaves through a barrel roll that would twist a lighter fighter apart if flown too fast. A Zero overshoots, climbing on inertia, delicate as a kite trembling at the end of its string. Haggerty rides the Hellcat through the top of the roll, drops the nose, and the 650s hammer. The enemy's canopy flowers into shrapnel. A streamer of smoke reaches down like a finger. Below, the Avengers push through the gap. One gunner throws Haggerty a wild wave. He closes his hand around the throttle with a brief, private grin and shoves back into the climb. Over the radio, kill calls stack like poker chips. Splash, splash 2, Judy burning. The sky chews men without ceremony. The system, radar, vectors, discipline, spares as many as it can. Between them thread the rawer sounds. The clipped curse, the sucked breath. The sudden silence when a call sign doesn't answer. Across 20 miles, another carrier's Cappy dives and peels. Within minutes, the larger pattern emerges. The Japanese raids breaking into smaller clumps, each pinned and stripped by higher Hellcats that refuse the slow spiral of a turn fight. The Zero can still twist within its own wingspan, and in a level 2 circle will make a fool of anything heavy. But this is not 1942 over the slot. The Hellcat fights in vertical strokes. Dive, fire, zoom, reset. It is a pendulum with teeth, and it is flown, today, by men who have practiced it in chalked classrooms and over open sea, until their bodies keep the cadence without thinking. Haggerty checks his panel. Oil pressure steady. Cylinder head temps holding. A smear of brown streaks the starboard wing where one of the Brownings has blown lube. The gun still feeds. He notices, distractedly, little white crescents pinged from the propeller's leading edges by sand grains in the air. The machine wears the battle like jewelry and does not complain. CIC to all. Cape. Friendly strike inbound feet wet. Angels 1-5, bearing 270. New raid detected. Angels 2-0, bearing 095, closing fast. The voice is calm, the words a metronome. Haggerty sees them now. Tiny V's moving toward a rendezvous of disaster. He shoves the nose and calls, "Red section, tally east." We'll bow their line and split them. They meet at a slant, and the Zeros try to climb to meet him. He is already passing. He picks the outside wingman of a 4-ship, judges the drift across his windscreen, and presses for 1 count. The tracers walk the length of a wing, and the wing departs the airplane. The next second is a furnace. Bits of engine, coolant steam, a smear of oil. Then he is through. A Judy slants down toward the carriers, promising hurt. Blue section drops across it like a paper cutter blade. A wing folds. The dive becomes a fall. Seconds stretch. Minutes collapse. The air war turns into arithmetic, you feel. 6 guns x 2 seconds. A skull vibrating solve. Keep your speed. Keep your altitude. Keep your wingman alive. Haggerty and Parker trade the lead like boxers trading space. When a Zero follows Parker down the hill too eagerly, Haggerty chops a bite off its tail. When Haggerty climbs slow, Parker saws the air between him and the nearest red dot with bully bursts that make the enemy think twice. By late afternoon, the light flattens and the sea turns pewter. The great raid that was supposed to knock holes in American decks has dissolved into ghosts, smoke pillars, and the odd lonely intruder that dies trying. Over the task force, flak puffs mark the sky in an orderly quilt. The last line if anything slips past the cats. It mostly doesn't. On Haggerty's 4th pass, he looks down, far down, and catches a quick, dizzy view of the fleet. Carriers streaming into the wind, deck crews resetting the steel choreography, crash barriers taut, LSO paddles poised. Red section, fuel state, Haggerty calls. Red 2, 200. Red 3, 215. Red 4, 190. Bingo soon, Haggerty answers, throat dry. CIC, Red Actual Requests Recovery, approved. Marshall Angels 8 over Mother. Case Y, expect Charlie in 5. He steals one last look east. The horizon is emptying. No fresh pips, no massed shapes. Somewhere beyond sight, the Japanese carriers are running, their air groups scattered thin across the long blue. The radio crackles with the word pilots will say for years with a rueful smile and a distant stare. Turkey Shoot. Haggerty doesn't say it. He just feels the ache in his shoulders and the iron pulse of the engine and the way the Hellcat, even after hits and dives and hard pulls, still comes home square. He takes the stack over the carrier and rides the racetrack, dropping a notch of flaps, letting the fuel burn down to safe landing weight. The deck below is a rectangle of hope in a steel ocean. The paddles rise and waggle. He rolls in, speed on speed, meatball centered. The hook bites wire with a punishing jerk. The Hellcat claps to a stop, tail sagging, engine crackling as it idles. Yellow shirts sprint. The wings fold with a hydraulic sigh, turning wide strength into tight geometry. The canopy slides back and the whole world smells like hot oil and salt and cordite. Haggerty pops the harness and looks down the deck. More cats are coming. Some never will. On the island, the fighter director pulls his headphones off and rubs the marks they left behind. He pencils a number on a board that is only half the truth. Out east, the sun slides. The day is not over. June 20th, 1944. Before dawn, the ready room is a low cave of coffee steam and sweat salt. A maintenance chief runs a grease-black finger along a ragged bullet groove in Haggerty's starboard wing. Segan grunts, "We'll dope and tape the skin, sir, and swap that feed tray. Your Iron Works special will be prettier than Sunday." The Hellcat squats on chocks in the red glow of battle lanterns. Wing roots peppered, tires scuffed, gun muzzles stained with a faint soot halo. Crewmen roll a fresh drum of 50 cal links, each cartridge clicking like prayer beads. Somewhere below, the R-2800 slated for an engine change coughs as a mechanic bump starts the magnetos. Thick, overbuilt, forgiving. These are the words on the crewmen's tongues when they think the pilots can't hear. Briefing. "We missed the enemy carriers' throats yesterday," the strike leader says, pointer wrapping a waxed chart. "Today we run them down. Expect a late recovery, beyond civil twilight. Hellcats cover the bombers. No freelancing. On the board, KP cycles, deck spots, fuel curves, radio nets." In a side column, a list of lost call signs that everyone has traced with their eyes already. Privately. By mid-morning, the hunt is a chess game across a steel-gray ocean. Scouts report glints and wakes. Scouts come back with stories written in oil smoke. The fleet turns southwest. Wind picks up. On the flight deck, Haggerty straps into an F6F now patched with quick-curing dope. A new ammo load slung in its wings like iron promise. Parker plants a boot on the step and hauls himself into his cockpit with the weary grace of a man who has done it 1,000 times in his head. The launch officer rolls his wrist. The catapult heaves. The sea falls away. They climb into air so clear it hurts. Under the canopy rim, Haggerty can see a chain of islands gloving the horizon and the high mare's tail of weather. That would make a Zero skitter, but leaves a Hellcat unbothered. The strike strings out. Hell divers shouldering bombs, Avengers fat with torpedoes, and above them the escort, blue-gray and unsentimental. The radio is clipped, tight. Signal Charlie on return will be late, the leader warns, as if saying it early will make the dark any less indifferent. They find the Japanese in late afternoon, smudges of carrier wakes, specks lifting and circling, a scattered, hurried shield that's thinner than yesterday. The first intercept comes low and forward, Zeros slanting in to claw the bombers. Haggerty pitches the nose, converts altitude into speed, and the Hellcat does what it was shaped in metal to do. It falls like a hammer. He takes the outside attacker with a 2-second burst that rattles his bones. The Zero's tail saws off. The rest folds like wet paper. The next climbs too steep, bleeds too much, shows a silver belly the size of a barn door. Parker's guns speak for both of them. The Judy it guarded staggers, wings juddering, and then the dive becomes a smoking line straight into the sea. They circle and slash, a metronome of violence. A Zero heels into a desperate flat turn, trying to bait Haggerty into the horizontal dance where the older lessons still say the Japanese win. He will not. He takes the vertical again, up, hold, half roll, down, and clips the Zero's engine with a sawed-off burst as it climbs through his sight picture. Oil blows. The canopy flashes with a hand's breadth of flame. Splash, Parker calls. Bombers stream past beneath, their pilots staring into the green eye of their own attack runs. Over the enemy formation, black dots pock the air as flak wakes to its work. A helldiver drops, wings screeching with strain, bomb lifting off like a dull thought and then blossoming into white sea-capped fury near a turning carrier. Haggerty catches only a fragment. A deck, a plume, men running. And then the escorts are tugging him away, out, before the flak can learn his name. Dusk catches them midway home. The ocean goes from steel to slate to something without color. Fuel needles creep toward the cruel part of the gauge. The strike leader's voice is a quiet metronome. Check ZB. Haggerty twists the selector, and the yay homing beacon hums in his headset with a coded heartbeat. Dit-da-dit, the assigned letter for mother. He noses toward the sound. Behind him, a long trail of aircraft strings out, like a ragged constellation, each riding its own thin ladder of fumes toward a deck that will have to light itself like a billboard in enemy waters to catch them. Full night. The carriers break blackout doctrine because the alternative is to let their boys land in the sea. Deck edge lights glow dim. A meatball lens blooms. The LSO's wands carve little arcs of mercy in the dark. The ocean is a cold mouth rimmed with white. The first fighters come aboard in tight, snatching arrivals, hooks, clawing cables, wings folding like sleepy bats. Some miss. One splashes. A voice on guard starts to recite a prayer and cuts off halfway, either because the man is embarrassed or because he does not have breath for both the words and the flying. Haggerty's turn. He joins the marshal stack, eyes burning, legs lead. The ship's wake glows like a comet tail. He drops into the groove, on speed by feel, the Hellcat steady as a stoop-shouldered friend shouldering you home. Come left, little power. Hold it. Roger, roger, cut. The deck leaps up. The hook bites. He is slammed into the strap so hard his teeth click. He stops dead, heart punching, hands welded to the stick. Then he's rolling clear, wings folding, yellow shirts pulling him by pant legs and sleeves as the next shadow ghosts past the island for its own shot at daylight. Hours later, with the deck finally quiet and the dark thick as tar, Haggerty walks the catwalk and looks down into the black. A destroyer wallows on plane guard, picking up men from rafts, green chem lights bobbing like will-o'-the-wisps. He can hear, faint as thought, the beat of another R-2800 spinning down in the maintenance bay, already rewrapping a wounded Hellcat for tomorrow. The rumor about Japanese aviators laughing at the clumsy Grummans feels old now. A museum piece beside the smell of hot oil and salt. The weight of armor plate behind his shoulder blades. The 2-day tally chalked on a bulkhead and then scrubbed away because numbers never quite hold the shape of the men behind them. In the dark, the fighter director smokes a cigarette to its filter and grinds it out in a coffee cup. "We found them," he says to no one. "We made them run." Somewhere out there, the enemy carriers limp under the night, their pilots scattered across 1,000 miles of water. Here, on a square of steel in a hostile ocean, the Hellcats sleep, scarred, fuel-stained, brutal, and the men who fly them sleep the same way. October 24th, 1944. Sibuyan Sea, the light as sharp as a knife. The ready room hums with voices and the rasp of pencils marking fuel and ammo on kneeboards. Someone has chalked yesterday's tally on the bulkhead, slashes bundled into fives, then rubbed them half away, a superstition against tempting the sea. Haggerty rolls his shoulders while the strike leader points at the map. Enemy forces converging on the Gulf. Expect heavy raids. Cap. Tight over the deck until we get the word. If we tangle with a mass strike, keep it vertical, keep it disciplined. A crewman slips him a grin, taps the Grumman Iron Works patch with a knuckle. Boss says if you bend her again, we'll just straighten the boat. On deck, heat wobbles the air. The Hellcats sit in neat, predatory rows, F6F 5s now, a little cleaner, a little meaner. Fresh guns bore-snaked to a starched shine. Yellow shirts whirl the ballet. The flag snaps from the mast. On the island, the CIC talker leans into his mic. Raid bearing 180, Angels 16, speed 250. The fighter director's pencil ticks the plexiglass plot. The rhythm is familiar, a drumbeat that has marched them from the Gilberts to the Marshalls to here. Launch cap. Blue and red, vector 210. Angels 22. Expect multiple groups. Haggerty is airborne in a blur of catapult steam and bellowing R-2800. Parker slides into position off his starboard, a steady shadow. Below them, the carriers turn into the wind. Beyond them, mountains crouch in dark green, the archipelago like teeth around the surf. CIC, red actual. Confirm Angels on inbound? He calls, mouth dry, hand easy on the throttle because the machine rewards a calm touch. Angels 16. Second group Angels 18. Bandit types unknown. The voice in his ear is a lifeline that runs from radar phosphor to gun sight, from men hunched in a dark room to men banking in fragile aluminum under a hot sky. They see the strike at 10 miles, specks fattening into crosses, the guard fighters weaving like minnows over a school of Judy bombers. Haggerty angles in high, shaves off altitude and trades it for speed, the Hellcat stiff-backed and eager in his hands. He picks the outboard escorting 0, leads it into the sight, and touches a 2-second burst. The 650s thump the air. The 0 slews, fire licking out of the wing root, and tumbles in a spiral that leaves a corkscrew of smoke on the bright blue. Splash, Parker says. No triumph in it. Just a mark on a ledger that only half exists. Then the radio crackles with a voice from another deck. Cool, clipped, almost bored. Engaging bandits. Tally. Tally multiple. Down sun. 2 Hellcats slash through a clump of bombers and rise like thrown knives. Word will run later that a squadron commander, McCampbell, has carved a legend out of this hour. But Haggerty only glimpses the signature of it. Silhouettes falling, the air punched full of sudden black flowers, a run of kill calls too quick to separate. The truth is always smaller and larger up here. Your instrument needles, your wingman's wingtip, the way the enemy's formation wobbles when its nerve cracks. The fight spreads. Zeros try to bait them low and flat. Haggerty refuses, every lesson from the past 2 years etched into bone. He dives, snaps a burst that chews the vertical fin off a Judy about to tip into its run, then zooms back through the guard fighters while Parker saws a warning pattern of tracers to keep a red ball bandit honest. A Hellcat 2 sections over takes hits, belches smoke, holds level. "You're on fire, 4. Bail out." Someone screams. "Negative," the pilot pants. "She's still pulling." Iron Works, boys. The plane limps west, trailing a flag of black that curls into the heat like a secret. And even as Haggerty points his nose toward another threat, he tucks that sentence somewhere behind his heart. By noon, the raid is broken, the sea pocked with wreckage. Wings floating like shed leaves, rafts bobbing, slicks of fuel spreading into rainbow oilskin. The carriers keep steaming, the deck cycles keep grinding, the sky keeps demanding. Between launches, Haggerty stands in the catwalk, the wind tearing at his flight suit, and watches ordnance crews hoist fresh belts of 50 cal into the wings. An ordnance man pats the Hellcats cowling like a working dog and shouts, "She'll see you to supper." Haggerty doesn't answer because the loudspeaker is calling, "Night fighters brief in CIC, sunset." The same day's second face. Haggerty walks into CIC's red gloom behind a pair of pilots with black-painted F6F5Ns spotted on the bow. The APS-6 scope glows like a damp moon inside their cockpits when they fly. Here, on the wall, the big air search repeats pulsing sweeps that will be their wider eyes. The fighter director taps the plot. "Night intercepts likely. Ye beacons on, we'll talk you onto them. No lights until the groove. You'll have company, intruders and our own boys low and dirty." One of the night fighter pilots, called Sign Moondog, folds a gum wrapper into a neat square and tucks it under the edge of the scope as a ward against bad luck. Dark folds down in layers. The guns die to clicks, the engines become distant thunder. Far off, a thin, illicit light, an intruder's exhaust, strokes the horizon. The controller's voice goes soft. "Moondog, come right to 085. Angel 6. Bogey is steady on 180. The night Hellcat's reply is spare. Moondog." Haggerty stands with a headset on, a ghost in the room where the orchestra is conducted, and hears the calm duet, heading, speed, turn, range, until the last numbers come quick and the pilot's breathing slows. Contact. Contact tight. Guns, guns. A beat. Splash, controller. No one cheers. The sea swallows the sound. Another call, another intercept. Then a lost voice, clipped, rising, punching out. Silence. The controller's pencil stops moving. Haggerty presses the headset cups tighter against his skull until the rubber rims ache. Close to midnight, the enemy ebbs. On deck, lantern cones guide the black-nosed Hellcats home. The meatball is dim, the LSO's wands careful arcs. Haggerty watches one night fighter make the groove high, settle, drop, the hook kissing wire in a hard metallic shout that vibrates through the ship's bones. The pilot's canopy slides back. His face is pale with a particular strain of flying by instruments and faith. He raises one finger, not triumph. Just one more hour stacked on the long, dark tower. By morning, the chalkboard will change again. New slashes, new names half erased. Somewhere out there, men who laughed at thick-skinned Grummans are now writing letters home that will never arrive. Somewhere in here, mechanics will pull cowlings, wipe oil, and talk to engines in low voices, as if the big radials can hear praise. And Haggerty will pour coffee into a cup that smells like cordite and salt, and count the beats of a life measured in vectors and recovery times, in booming dives, and the way a sturdy blue cat shrugs off punishment and comes back for more. April 6, 1945. East China Sea, north of Okinawa. Dawn crawls up like a knife edge under low rain cloud. The task force rides a restless swell. Gray ships on a gray sea under a gray sky. Only the deck crew's jerseys carry color, yellow, blue, green, moving through catapult steam as if they've been stitched into the ship herself. On the island, a talker reads from a clipboard in a flat voice. Baker Pickett reports multiple bogeys. Charlie Pickett under attack. Fast movers inbound, Angels 5 to 10. The words Pickett knot the stomachs of men in CIC. Those lonely destroyers and destroyer escorts, radar outposts thrust far from the carriers, will catch the first fists. Haggerty pulls the canopy closed on his F6F5, the latch clacking into certainty. The cockpit smells of rubber masks and sun-baked paint, cordite soaked into the seams from a dozen fights. He checks the new ANAPS 6 sets panel. Dark for daytime, but ready if the clouds swallow the world. Parker's Hellcat squats on the next cat. Black scuffs along the wing route. A chalked stencil near the gun bay door. 2 characters a crewman claims mean tough cat in somebody's dictionary. The launch officer's hand slices. The catapult punches. The Iron Works heaves them into the gray. They climb into weather that wants them dead. The clouds are torn wool. The rain is steel filings. The double wasp's note is a steady drumming in the bones, a metronome for concentration. CIC vectors them low, kamikaze altitude, because the enemy has learned a new arithmetic. 1 plane, 1 ship, 1 hole punched in the ocean's order. Red section, steer 310. Bogeys at Angel 7 over Baker Pickett. Reports multiple splashes and 1 smoking. The voice is clipped, tight against fear. They break cloud, and the scene hits like a fist. A Fletcher-class destroyer slewing hard, wake white, black smoke pouring from her aft stack, flak tracing frantic commas into the sky. Low, coming in hot, a line of shapes with squared-off tails and fixed landing gear. Chi-43s or Chi-84s flying a straight, deliberate line that says intent more than any radio call ever could. A 0 slides above them as shepherd and knife. Haggerty shoves the nose, throttle hard to the stop. The Hellcat bellows and becomes a falling anvil. He takes the shepherd first, short burst, muzzle blaze licking the gray air. The canopy of the 0 scabs white with hits. It yaws and peels. Parker rips across the lead attacker's canopy at a slant, then snaps a burst into the second. 1 kamikaze flares early, wing shearing, cartwheeling into a geyser short of the destroyer's bow. Another bores on. Flak walks up to meet it, black puffs eating sky. But the plane keeps its stupid, holy line. Take him, take him. Parker's voice cracks, and Haggerty finds the shot as if the weather itself opens a tunnel. 2 seconds on the trigger. The 50s chew the engine clean off its mounts. The attacker staggers, lifts, and misses, clipping mast and rigging in a shriek of metal instead of punching through the destroyer's deck. Men in tin hats wave like castaways, then vanish in the gray as the ship slews smoke to hide. Baker to Capi, bless you, a voice blurts on guard, rough with oil smoke and shock. We're still here. No time to answer. Another pair comes low under the weather, using the squalls like walls. Haggerty drops, then hauls, a vertical stroke through rain that hammers the canopy. Tracers look like sewing needles in the wet. The second attacker catches a wingful and becomes a scythe. The third dives so flat he almost sits on the sea. Parker dives lower still, and the prop digs into spray, a rooster tail flaring. But the Brownings stitch the cockpit, and the plane settles into water as if it remembered it belongs there. The fight frays into hunt and swat. Clouds half swallow silhouettes, then spit them out. CIC's vectors come with little stutters in the talker's voice now. Too many plots, too many friendlies. Too many reports of hits and splashes on stations with code names that feel like family. Over the radio, men call bearings with voices that know they've used up their luck. Up and down the picket line, Hellcats from decks Haggerty will never set foot on do the same work, diving, slashing, refusing the level turn, trusting in speed, weight, and a plane that forgives hard hands. By noon, the weather goes iron and the raids thin. But they don't stop. A Nakajima dives through a tear in the clouds toward a carrier, Haggerty's carrier, its spinner aimed at the island like a promise. The flak barrage is instant and geometric, puffs in layered rings. But the attacker keeps coming, then jerks, then burns as a pair of cats from the opposite KP slice through its path like crossed sabers. It tumbles in greasy pieces into the wake, and the whole ship breathes again without knowing it had been holding its breath. Recovery is a fist fight with the air. The deck is slick, the wind is fickle. The ship's bow buries in a swell and flings spray over the lens of the meatball. Haggerty rides the groove on feel, the Hellcat heavy and honest in his hands. The hook bounces the first wire, scrapes the deck, then claws the second. The stop is brutal, grateful. Yellow shirts materialize out of steam and rain. A plane captain slaps the cowling and shouts, "She'll take more than that." Because that is what you say to keep your hands from shaking. Between cycles, the ordnance crew feeds belts into the wings with numb, clever fingers. Someone hands Haggerty a Dixie cup of coffee that tastes of rust and fuel and mercy. On the catwalk below, sailors from the picket destroyer, winched aboard from the plane guard, stand in blankets, faces streaked black, eyes bright as new coins. One of them looks up at the folded wing cats and mouths something like thanks or prayer, or both. Afternoon raids come smaller, meaner, lower. The work repeats with variations, a drum solo played with sledgehammers. The killboard in the ready room starts to look like bad math. Slashes in untidy stacks that no one recites aloud. On a bulkhead, somebody has chalked a running tally for the squadron since last year, names and slashes and little silhouettes of enemy types, a private, wrong way to count anything. Haggerty traces the edges with a grimy finger, then erases the newest marks until the chalk makes only a pale smear. The numbers matter and do not. The way rain both is and is not the ocean. Dusk again, as if the world can't stop bruising. The last raid breaks on weather and flak and the patience of men who have recalibrated their fear around a single task. When night finally takes the sky, the ship runs dark again. The deck crew coils hoses that steam in the cooling air. Mechanics slide under cowlings with flashlights and rags. Someone, somewhere, starts to hum "I'll Be Seeing You" and cuts it off after 2 bars because the song can pull a man apart. Haggerty stands at the bow in the wind, Parker beside him, both of them smelling of wet canvas and cordite. Far out, lightning throbs in a cloud bank like a slow heartbeat. "How many today?" Parker asks without looking. "Enough," Haggerty says, because any other answer is a lie. He thinks of the laughter in 1942 ready rooms, in intercepted chatter, in old reports that called the Grummans clumsy and slow. He thinks of armor plate puckered by cannon shells, engines that kept torque with a cylinder shot out, wings that landed bent and flew again 12 hours later. He thinks of radar that talked fighters into the right patch of sky, and of destroyers that lit cigarettes for freezing pilots in the dark. The ocean slides by, indifferent and infinite, and the Hellcats hunch on deck like working dogs sleeping light. Tomorrow will ask again. The catapults will punch again. The sky will decide again whom it keeps. But the blue cats will go up. And when they come down, more often than not, they will have cut more holes in enemy air than the enemy can cut in theirs. July 14th, 1945. Off Honshu under a chalk-white overcast. The fleet runs northeast in gray procession. Task Force 38 steaming for the enemy's front porch. The ready room smells like wet canvas and black coffee. Someone's pinned a mimeograph of the day's deck cycle to a corkboard and drawn a crude cat face in the corner with 6 fangs for guns. Targets: rail ferries, airfields, coastal shipping, the strike leader says. Pointer tapping a map dotted with kanji names that roll off American tongues like marbles. Defenses heavier near Tokyo Plain. Expect light, scattered intercepts, with the occasional well-flown surprise. Remember, don't loiter. Up the hill, down the hill, reset. Haggerty runs a finger along the rivet line where yesterday's shrapnel nipped his Hellcat's port flap. The crew chief, Pop, though he's 34, stands with hands on hips, chin streaked with graphite from a torqued safety wire. "We changed the left outboard Browning, sir," Pop says. "Fed a bad link yesterday and got shy. This one sings." He pats the cowling. Oil coolers snug, armor plate cleaned of the glamour. Glamour, he means. The glitter of spalled metal that clung after hits. Iron Works' pride is half performance, half ritual. The cats launch into air that tastes of rain. Clouds sit in tears. The overcast is an upside-down city. Haggerty and Parker climb to Angels 2-1 with a second element tucked in tight, their wingtips steady little vows. Below, Helldivers shoulder bombs to bridges. Avengers trundle off to look for the small sins of war. Barges, trawlers, the kind of shipping that still keeps rice moving despite everything. The radio net is clipped and layered. Red 2, check oxygen. Blue 3, move off my prop wash. CIC to red actual, vector 270. Bogies Angels 17, fast and weaving. They never see the enemy at first. They hear him. A sudden metallic rattle at the edge of sense. An engine somewhere where the cloud is thickest. Then a rip through the overcast, and a Kai 84 Hayate flashes past. Sleek, tough, a reminder the foe still builds good fighters, even this late. Haggerty rolls hard, puts the sight just beyond a flicker of canopy, presses for a 1 count. The 50's hammer. The Kai 84 yawns, a quick spurt of flame from the cowl, and drops back into cloud like a coin into a well. "Don't chase," he says, breath fogging his mask. "Reset high." They burst top of cloud, sun turning the undercast into a white desert. Up here, the Hellcat is king by mass and patience. He holds, waits, watches the billows for the track of another engine's heat slick. A Zero erupts in a steep climb, trying the old trick, force a stall, flip into a flat fight. Haggerty declines with the iron courtesy learned the hard way. He angles, drops, 2 seconds of fire, and the Zero's outboard wing breaks like hard candy. "Splash," Parker calls, already checking 6. Across the sector, other fights open and close like shutters. A night fighter section flying in daylight, black-nosed F6F ends, gets a vector on a lone bogey and merges with it at cloud top. APS calls him steady, the pilot says, voice as calm as a man naming stars. Guns. Guns. A beat. Contact lost. It's clinical, almost gentle. A kill made with instruments and practiced breathing. The strike shifts inward. They follow a rail line to a river mouth where ferries nose toward each other like beasts in a rut. Helldivers fold in and let go. Bombs bracket a pier, water jumps, a ferry slews and burns. Light flak blizzards the sky. Stitch, stitch, stitch sounds like someone tearing linen nearby. A burst clips Haggerty's right wing. The Hellcat shivers. A warning lamp winks and dies as a wire shakes back into its terminal by a mercy of vibration. He noses up, counts to 3, half rolls, comes down like a safe dropped from a roof onto a Kai 43 trying to claw the bombers. 2 short bursts. The Oscar tears open and folds. On the way out, they get the surprise the brief promised. 3 more Hayatis appear nose-on, gutsy and quick, trying to carve a swipe at Parker. Haggerty throws the nose across and taps the trigger just to make them think. And one pilot does, reflexively jinking away from a burst that would have missed by yards. That half-second is all Parker needs. His tracers cross the lead spinner, and the cowling opens like a book. The second presses too close, sees Hellcat bulk coming at him like a door in a narrow hallway, and breaks off. The third is suddenly alone. He dives. Haggerty follows just enough to bloody his speed, then zooms back to altitude. Discipline is a muscle that aches when you've worked it right. Recovery is a low, sullen grind of weather and fuel. They drop through slant rain and gray soup to find the carrier a small, patient rectangle, dragging a white wake on a flat, near-featureless sea. The meatball glows like a tiny domestic lamp in a world made of tin. Haggerty rides the groove with the feel he trusts now more than sight. A steady tremble in the stick, the hum of air on the gear doors, the way the engine's note fattens when you are about to be right. Power, hold, ease, cut. The wire rips his whole life to a stop in one brutal, grateful second. In the ready room, a yeoman updates the board. Small ship silhouettes for strafed barges, narrow lines for bridges, a scattered set of kill marks, chalked careful, then smudged by a palm. The skipper stands in front of the numbers and clears his throat. Debrief. Enemy resistance stiff in patches, disorganized overall. Our losses light. He pauses, looks over the room in the quiet after engines. You know you've been hearing it for years, how they laughed at thick Grummans. You know how many of us came home in a plane that had no right to? Don't let the joke die. It belongs to us now. Haggerty finds Pop on the hangar deck, sleeves rolled, cigarette hanging, oil-black fingerprints dotting his cheek. They walk along the row of cats, hands brushing dented flaps and patched panels like men at a stable checking withers and fetlocks. One Hellcat wears a jagged bite where a 20mm tried to come through and failed. Plate stopped it, Pop says, pressing the dent with 3 fingers as if feeling the bruise on a friend. Still made weight on the wire. Night lifts off the sea again. A softer dark than spring's cruelty. Somewhere forward, a phonograph scratches through sentimental journey until the needle hops and someone laughs and lets it spin. Above, on the island, CIC keeps its red-lit vigil. The cats cool and tick and smell of hot metal and salt. Haggerty leans on a wing root and counts backward through days. Not victories, but arrivals. Landing lights seen at the last second. The thump of armor catching what would have been terminal. The confident talk of a controller steering ghosts toward specks and making them meet. Add those together and you get a number with 2 digits before the colon. A ledger that is not luck alone. Tomorrow the targets will be different by inches. The lessons will be the same by miles. The Iron Works machines will go back into the sky. And when they return, scarred and loud and unhurt in the ways that count, no one on this ship will be surprised. August 15th, 1945. Off the Honshu coast, dawn rolls in like silk instead of steel. The sea is pale and almost polite. On the ready room chalkboard, someone has written the deck cycle, and then, in smaller hand beneath it, stand by for possible developments. Nobody says the word. Haggerty buckles into his F6F and runs a glove across the stitched Grumman patch the way men cross themselves before a hard climb. Parker slides into his own cockpit and twirls 2 fingers. Same signal as always, meaning, I'm with you until the wire or the water. Launch. The cats heave them skyward into air that feels unarmed. The radios are unusually clean of crosstalk, no picket panics, no tight-breathed vectors from CIC. They take their KP station and carve the quiet into orbits, eyes sweeping the edges where trouble usually grows. Haggerty's kneeboard has a fuel curve, a vector grid, and, because habit is its own superstition, a pencil line ready for tally marks that today refuses to move. Mid-morning, the call comes from the carrier's voice circuit, passed to the fighter net by a talker who stumbles on the words and then says them perfectly. All aircraft, stand by. Cease offensive operations. Repeat, cease offensive operations. The sentence feels like a sudden absence of weight. A moment later, the fighter director adds, as if he cannot help himself, maintain cap. Eyes open. Because even peace, at first, must be guarded. They keep flying. A pair of Ki-43s materializes in the haze, not angling in, not weaving. Just there, heading west with the tentative, disbelieving steadiness of men who have heard the same message in another language. Haggerty eases closer, wings rock level, palms up in the universal sign for "We are done." The Japanese pilot, goggles crooked, face a map of fatigue, rocks his wings back and continues. It is the strangest merge of the war. Two machines designed to kill one another, choosing for once to be only airplanes. On recovery, the deck crew handles the returning Hellcats the way one backs a friend out of a fight he no longer needs. Brisk, careful, a little dazed. In the ready room, the skipper stands with a mug that has known too much coffee and says, "We'll keep the board." He gestures to the chalked ledger, names, slashes, silhouettes, smudges where grief was wiped with a thumb. Not to boast. To remember how the work was done. Days pass measured in CAPI orbits and guarded approaches. Pilots who have lived with a metronome of vectors find themselves listening to the slower clock of the ship. Meals on time, mail in sacks that smell of damp ink, rumors walking. In quiet moments, numbers surface like wreckage rising in a calm sea. The men who say the figures do not grin when they say them. The talk is low-voiced, almost embarrassed. How the F6F tally has climbed to a count that sounds like myth. Thousands of enemy machines destroyed since the first cats clawed into a Guadalcanal dawn. How the ratio of kills to losses, counted across fleets and months and long blue miles, sits in the double digits. They look at the empty chairs and the dented armor plates stacked by the maintenance shop like spent shields and let the arithmetic cast a shadow shaped like the friends it cost. September 2nd, 1945. Tokyo Bay lies flat as a held breath. The fleet creeps in under a sky the color of tin, battleships and carriers and destroyers, arranged as if for a photograph. Haggerty stands on the island catwalk in a float coat, headset around his neck, and watches a varnished launch ferry dignitaries toward a battleship with a Missouri name. Above, black-nosed Hellcats from the night fighter squadron orbit slow and ceremonial. APS-6 sets dark now. Guns safed, the big radials turning the air into a steady purr. Even the wind seems to take instruction. Red actual, you're cleared for cap over the anchorage. The controller's voice is soft with the kind of honor that doesn't need ceremony. Keep it tidy. Haggerty and Parker climb in and roll, hooks stowed, flaps up, throttles eased forward not with urgency, but with the care a man uses when he touches a healed wound. The Hellcats rise and circle above ships whose decks are crowded with sailors standing still enough to look like carved railings. From this height, the Missouri's deck is a narrow ledger on which pens scratch history into paper and silence into men's throats. They bank, slow, respectful. The bay smells of mud and diesel and a future nobody quite trusts. Haggerty looks down through his canopy at a world that is suddenly wider than briefings and target folders. He thinks of his first launch into the Philippine sea glare, of the way a Zero came apart under 6 Brownings, of Parker's voice snapping him into the break that saved his life, of radar vectors spoken like prayers over long water. He thinks of armor plate buckled and still faithful, of wings patched with dope that held, of links fed by hands that shook only when they were empty. He thinks of the laughter, not cruel now, just distant, once thrown at thick-skinned cats that brawled instead of danced. The joke did not survive the miles. Recovery from the ceremony. Capi is gentle, as if the ship itself is tender with its pilots. The wire catches with a thump that feels like punctuation. Full stop. On the hangar deck, Pop wipes his hands on a rag and says nothing for a long time. Then he taps the dent by the port gun bay, the the one he never quite buffed smooth, and grins without showing teeth. "Wouldn't trade her for a box of gold?" he says. Haggerty nods because anything more would be theater, and they have had enough of that. Night settles over the bay. The ships keep their lights on like houses on a street that has decided to be a neighborhood. In CIC, the scopes glow dim but still. Men sit their stations because peace can be lost by carelessness quicker than war can be won by courage. Parker steps out onto the catwalk with 2 tin mugs. They lean on a warm railing and drink coffee that tastes, for once, only like coffee. "Double digits," Parker says after a while, not bragging, just naming it. "Double digits," Haggerty answers, and hears in the phrase not a boast, but a ledger of how the big blue cats flew. Vectored by unseen hands, armed by men with oil-blackened fingers, flown by kids who learned to say no to the flat turn and yes to the hard climb. Built by a factory that made airplanes like anvils that could fly. Down in the dark, the Hellcats tick as their metal cools. Tomorrow they will fly patrols with their claws trimmed. Next week they will ride elevators into hangars that smell of peacetime. But the shape of them, thick, forgiving, brutal when they must be, will stay in the bones of everyone who took a wire with a pounding heart and climbed out to put a hand in a warm cowling and thank an engine by touch. On a bulkhead, someone finally erases the tally board clean. It leaves a faint white ghost, a chalk shadow that says what numbers never quite can. September 3rd, 15th, 1945. Tokyo Bay in daylight looks like a ship parade that ran out of adjectives. Battleships with their knuckles showing, carriers broad as city blocks, destroyers twitchy and alert even with their teeth put away. On the carrier's hangar deck, the cats sit with their wings folded, oil still sweet in the air, panels off, tools in neat trays, as if another launch might be called at any second by a voice no one can hear yet. Haggerty signs a maintenance card with a blunt pencil while Pop watches from under a cowling with the wary affection of a man seeing a kid off to school. "We'll safety wire her for the crossing," Pop says, palm on the warm armor behind the pilot's seat. Iron Works to the end. CIC is quieter now. The big scopes still glow, but the talk has softened into the unhurried grammar of peacetime. Station assignments, harbor control, weather that matters only because men will be sleeping on deck for the breeze. The fighter director who once talked Hellcats into clawing, precise merges, now rehearses what it will be like to call inbound freight lighters to a pier. He rubs the ridge his headphones left behind and laughs once, short at the oddness of it. A yeoman brings the squadron clerk a thin stack of memeos. Preliminary Air Group Summary, 1943-1945, and sets them on the ready room table like a priest laying down a folded flag. The staple is crooked. The paper smells of damp ink. Haggerty drops into a chair and reads what he already knows, written in numbers he doesn't. Sorties flown. Bombs escorted. Planes claimed in the air and on the water. Friends lost to flak and weather and the wrong second. One page is a ledger of this ship alone. Another page, fat with print, tallies the bigger sky. How the men in blue cats, scattered across fleets and archipelagos, wrote the air wars ending in a ratio that starts with a clean number and a colon and keeps going in the kind of arithmetic that makes a room go quiet. The clerk clears his throat, embarrassed by math, and says only, "We did the work." Afternoons fill with errands that never existed before peace. Ferry flights to inland strips where grass brushes props, photo passes over anchored fleets so ships' photographers can make souvenirs, slow orbits over surrender beaches where GIs in rolled sleeves wave like men at a train. Haggerty and Parker take a last cap over the bay and catch their reflections in a slice of still water between gray hulls. 2 Hellcats seen from below, steady and stubby and patient, like working dogs cocking their ears at the sound of home. Underway at last. The carrier turns east with the practiced arrogance of a homing pigeon. On day 3, the weather freshens. On day 5, the sea begins its long, old story in gray. The cats are chained and chalked nose to tail. Men come topside to sleep in the wind, faces turned to a sky with no flak in it. A sailor with a guitar picks the same 3 chords until fingers stiffen. Pop runs a hand along a row of patched panels and stops where a 20mm burst once spidered the skin. Rivet heads pocked, dope smoothed like a scar. Held, he says to no one in particular. Held when it had to. Mail sacks appear. Some are opened carefully and then folded small. Some are opened once and kept under a pillow like a pilot keeps a kneeboard. Haggerty receives a photo. Bethpage, Long Island. Grumman workers packed shoulder to shoulder on a factory floor, shoulders squared under signs that say, safe, sturdy, simple. Women with bandanas, men with pencils behind their ears, a boy too young to shave standing on a crate to see over a fuselage jig. He traces, with a thumb, the big letters across the far wall. Iron Works. He has never been there. He has flown it his whole adult life. Farther east, the air sweetens. The swell shortens. Gulls appear. Then whales. Then nothing but the color of home. The ready room board, wiped clean in Tokyo Bay, stays clean by choice. On a chalk tray below it, someone leaves a single stub of white, as if to admit the itch to count never dies. It only sleeps. Landfall comes as a smell before it's a line, the roast of earth, a rumor of pine. Then there it is. Fog banks stacked like folded quilts, a lighthouse that has never known blackout, a coast that doesn't care about vectors. The ship picks up a pilot in a dress cap. Men line the rails. Below, on the hangar deck, the cats are being talked about in the past tense by men who put their hands on them as if the machines could take offense. You think they'll cut 'em up? Parker asks, voice light and not. Some, Haggerty says. Some will go to training fields, some to museums that smell like floor wax. Some. He looks at the dent under his port gun bay that Pop never buffed out. Some will be farm sheds, with blue paint underneath. The last flight for the blue cats on this ship comes not as a sortie, but as a slow parade. A handful are spotted forward, brought up to the line by yellow shirts who walk like men carrying sleeping children. Haggerty gets a slot on the roster. Functional check, local, full stop ashore. And feels the odd flutter of a first solo riding under 1,000 hours of war. The island talks him into the groove for the last time. The wire catches for the last time. The fold hydraulics sigh for the last time. He taxis to the elevator for the last time. And when the deck drops away under his wheels, he feels not relief, not loss, just a steady unwinding, like a winch giving back rope to a boat that's nudged safely into a slip. On a stateside strip long and forgiving, Haggerty rolls to a stop and kills the mixture. The double wasp coughs, then ticks itself quiet. He sits with his hands on the canopy rail, listening to a silence that is not empty, but full. The sound of a machine that did what it was asked, often, and never demanded a poem in return. He climbs down. Pop is already there somehow, fresh khakis, oil still in the fingerprints, running his hand across warm metal with the private joy of a craftsman recognizing his work in daylight. I'll miss the racket, Pop says. And Haggerty laughs because there is no other answer. In a hangar office that smells of paste and cardboard, a petty officer stamps a file. Transferred. The clerk who once handed out memeos now hands out envelopes with discharge dates instead of deck cycles. On a wall, someone has tacked up newspaper clippings. Pictures of blue cats in newsprint gray, captions trying and failing to make numbers into feelings. Haggerty reads one out loud without meaning to. A victory ratio in the double digits. And the room breathes around the phrase as if it were something hot. Parker, beside him, taps the margin with a nail and says, "They'll never know the shape of it." Haggerty nods. Shapes, he thinks, have names like radar vector, boom and zoom, armor plate. Parker's voice in his ear saying brake, a deck that moved under you like a promise, and then stopped you in the straps and said, stay. They step back onto the ramp because there's one more thing to do that nobody puts in manuals. Haggerty lays his palm on the armor behind the seat, half a prayer, half a thank you, and feels, under his skin, the echo of 1,000 booms and 1,000 steady, forgiving landings. You brought us home, he says to the metal. And if Parker hears, he doesn't say. In the evening, a depot crane lifts a Hellcat onto a flat car, chains creaking, paint scuffed and honest. Kids on bicycles watch, mouths open, like they're seeing a circus elephant agree to become a barn. A man in a fedora writes something down in a ledger. Serial numbers, dates, the narrow parts of history. The wide parts. The voice on the scope, the first sight of a Zero's wing root puffing white. The smell of hot oil and cordite, the way a heavy airplane taught light hands, stay in the men who lived them. Night comes early inland. On a table in the transient barracks, someone leaves a single stick of chalk next to a clean slate. No one reaches for it. Some counts don't need to be made again. Late September 1945. A stateside rail spur under a sky the color of nickel. The flat car jolts and squeals to a stop beside an air depot that smells of cut lumber and warm creosote. Haggerty and Parker stand with hands in pockets, while a crane lowers a blue F6F toward the ramp. Chain clinks, sling creaks. A crew chief on the ground whistles a slow, falling note as the tires kiss concrete. A corporal chalks a number on the tailwheel hub, then steps aside as if he's written something sacred. The pilot who rode that number through the Philippine Sea feels, unexpectedly, like a man leaving a dog at a neighbor's house. You know it's safe, and still it tugs. A hangar door rattles open. Inside, rows of birds wait like theater seats, some with wings off, some with panels open like book spines. The depot men talk in peacetime cadence. Where do you want her? Set the kit aside. Paperwork goes to Dock 3, and the sound has a kindness that war never had time for. Pop has already hustled ahead. Haggerty finds him by the port gun bay, fingers tracing the dent that refused to buff smooth. She's earned it, Pop says, almost proud of the bruise. Leave a mark so no one forgets she took a punch and didn't sit down. The depot clerk, sleeves rolled, leads them past a desk piled in memeo sheets. He flips one up without ceremony. Provisional roll-up, he says, and it's all the invitation they need. Numbers march in military rows, sorties, hours, bombs escorted that fell square, raids broken, pilots lost, aircraft saved. There's a page that doesn't belong to any single ship or squadron. It belongs to the whole blue nation of them. The tally of F6Fs in the air and on the water. The grim math of combat made into a column. At the bottom, a single figure sits like a door with a big hinge. A kill ratio with 2 digits before the colon. The clerk taps the margin with a pen, half shrug, half salute. Hard to believe until you've seen the armor plates stacked out back. They don't linger. The depot is a place for endings that want to be quiet. Outside, wind blows cottonwood seeds across the ramp like ash that forgot to be ash. Parker nudges Haggerty with an elbow and points. A kid, 16 maybe, pushing a broom with the reverence of a man handling a saber. When he reaches the Hellcat's nose, he stops, touches the cowl with the back of his fingers, and smiles like a secret. Let him have it, Parker murmurs. We had ours. Weeks turn, days soften. Haggerty takes a train east, watches the land unfurl in browns and golds and slow rivers, a place that keeps no tally but seasons. On a rainy morning, he steps off at a station with a name he doesn't know how to pronounce, and follows a hand-painted sign toward a factory gate in Bethpage. Grumman stands on the brick like a masthead. A guard with a veteran's eyes glances at his discharge papers and waves him through with a nod that says, "We know you already." Inside, The floor still carries the ghost of a production line. Stripes of paint, the negative space memory of jigs, a smell of dope threaded with hot coffee. On a wall above a long bench, someone has kept the old banners. Safe, sturdy, simple. A woman with a red scarf in her hair, grease at the knot, pride in the set of her shoulders, wipes her hands and says, "You flew our cats?" He says he did. She grins at the word "our" and leads him past a pallet stacked with armor plate cutouts that look like saints' halos. "We made them heavy on purpose," she says. "Got yelled at for it sometimes." Then the letters came. She taps a greasy cardboard box near the drill press. Postcards, folded V-mail, snapshots. The kind of mail that kept men and machines threaded across oceans. Haggerty picks one at random. A photograph of a cowling, a hand on it, the glove grimy, the caption scrawled, "You kept me alive." A foreman appears with a clipboard and a practical smile. "We're retooling," he says, as if apologizing for a circus closing. Trucks next. Maybe something with wings that seats 6 teenagers and a picnic basket. But these? He gestures around at the ribs and skins and stacks of rivets. They'll always be right there. He taps his temple. Not because of the numbers, because of how they felt when you needed them. On the way out, Haggerty passes a bulletin board layered with notices. Room for rent, baseball tryouts, church socials. Pinned over older papers that refuse to be forgotten. One is a photograph clipped from a paper the ink has turned violet. A Hellcat in a steep dive. Smoke trailing from the gun ports in a way the camera somehow caught. The caption reaches for adjectives and lands on arithmetic. One of the type that achieved a double-digit victory ratio. He wants to tell the caption what it missed. The radar voice that nudged him 3 degrees left. The glove streaked with grease on a midnight reload. Parker's unshowy humor when the weather tried to toss them into the sea. Pop's faith in armor plate. The way 6 Browning sounded like a door slamming on the dark. But newsprint has its limits. He lets it be an almost. He steps back into rain that smells like metal cooling. The platform clock ticks with a peacetime stubbornness, each second a small declarative sentence. A train pulls in. Steam hisses. People run for the shelter of its windows. Haggerty stands a moment longer, eye on a sliver of sky that lifts like a promise, then turns toward a future that isn't measured in vectors. That night, in a room that is finally silent enough to hear his own breath, he opens a plain envelope slipped into his jacket by Pop at the depot. Inside, a small square of blue-painted aluminum, edges sanded smooth, 4 rivet heads still proud, the back scrawled in pencil, held. He lays it on the windowsill, a private relic. Wind rattles the glass. Somewhere, a radio plays a tune that doesn't belong to any battle. He closes his eyes and, for the first time in years, does not listen for a talker's voice telling him where to turn. Iron Works, the knock says. Not a joke, not a myth. A way of building and of flying that turned laughter into an afterthought and miles into a ledger that cannot be erased, only folded and put away.